What did I do to myself? Today we're going to talk about actually using magic in Shadowrun. Hello everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your Master of Lore and Storyteller Extraordinaire. Getting back to talking about 5th edition Shadowrun, and today we're talking about how you actually go about using magic, since, well, we've been talking about magic users and the like and everything going on with that. It seems like a time to actually start breaking down mechanically how all that works, and it's a little bit of a doozy. But before we get into those specific details, if you're new here to the channel, then go on down there and hit the subscribe button and become a regular member here at the Gamer's Den. Or, if you've already joined that roster, then go on down there to hit the like button and share the video far and wide to help us grow ever further. But now, I'm going to stop dancing around it and actually get into it. So, when it comes to using magic, the first thing to understand is that, well, like most games, magic alters the world around it, sometimes so strongly that in the aftermath of its effects, people will still report something feeling off in the area. Chills, a sense of something just fundamentally being off. All are signs of magic effects or use. And magic is not often subtle. Mana bolts, fireballs, conjuring spirits, it's all pretty obvious. But the caster might be able to use more subtle spells, making it just that little bit more difficult for those around to pick up on it right away. And this just adds a great deal of depth and variety to things. But when it comes to casting your spells, doing any sort of spell casting, you're going to be picking a spell and a target. And now, the kind of spell is going to dictate how you can target it. Some are going to require you touch the target, others are only going to require line of sight. Some are specifically just going to affect the immediate area around you. It all just depends a little bit. Then, once you've done that, you pick the force of the spell. This is the limit on how strong it can be or how much effort you're putting into it, how much oomph you're giving the spell. For 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons players, this is like taking a 1st level spell and using a 4th level spell slot to cast it. It gives it a bit more power. Now, the max force that you can apply to anything is your magic rating times 2. And bear in mind that each point of force that you add will add a point of drain that you have to roll for afterwards. And when it comes to drain and force, when you do the spell casting, if you get more successes on your spell casting roll than what you've applied force for, the drain that you roll for goes from just being stun damage to physical damage, meaning you are actually doing damage to your body. And think of drain as just that expenditure of not only mana, but physical effort, willpower, and the like. That's the drain there. And this is the mechanic by which you are limited in how much spell casting you can do and how much force you can throw behind everything all the time, because statistically, rolling these dice pools, all these d6s, you will eventually start just accruing either too many successes and have to roll so much drain, and putting too much force behind everything means you have larger and larger pools to roll for, so you are potentially doing more and more and more damage to yourself. And when it comes to your maximum for your magic rating and how much force you can put behind that, basically if you have a magic rating of say 6, then your limit for force is 12. So your maximum force that you can do to anything is 12, while your magic rating is at 6. Once your magic rating goes up, the amount of force you can put behind things goes up. So there are trade-offs and benefits. It's all going to just depend on your judgment and what the situation is at hand. But going on from there, each spell description tells you how much drain you will need to roll for. For example, a lightning bolt is force minus 3. So if you decide to cast a lightning bolt with a force 8, You're going to subtract 3 from it and be left with 5 drain that you have to roll for afterwards. Now, then you're going to roll to cast the spell, and you'll be using your spell casting skill plus your magic stat. And your opponent will roll with their willpower stat to resist it. And the number of successes on this particular roll, minus the opposed willpower roll, will determine the damage for the lightning bolt. If you're doing something like healing, then the number of successes is how much damage you can heal and how much time it's taking to heal. So the number of successes you accrue with a healing spell determines how long it takes and how much health you can restore. So read each spell description that are going to describe to you mechanically how that spell will work and function and what you can do to affect it. And now, going on from there, now you're going to roll for your drain using your tradition's stats. So if you're a mage, you're going to use your logic and your willpower stat. Shamans will use charisma and willpower, and etc., so on and so forth. So this is what you'll be rolling to resist that drain from the force of the spell that you threw into the spell. And so because, sticking with our lightning bolt example, because we selected 8 force and the spell is force minus 3, we need 5 successes to resist all that drain. Now, remember earlier I said if you roll more, if you get more hits on your roll than you have force for the spell, you've exceeded that force, and thus the drain, instead of doing stun damage, will deal physical damage. So this is where it gets really important that you're able to resist the drain effect. And you can really do a lot of damage to yourself very fast. And bear in mind, this is as simply as I was able to figure out how to break down and explain this. There are several steps, and some of these steps and effects are determined by what spell you're selecting, the amount of force you put behind things, how many hits or successes you get on rolling your dice pools, because this all runs on d6s. It's not super complicated, but it's so interconnected and interwoven that trying to describe one part without describing the others is kind of difficult, and so you have to bounce back and forth through several things just to try to get this web untangled properly. It's one of my least favorite things about Shadowrun. Is just, aside from how poorly this particular edition's book is laid out, just how really screwy and tangly some of this stuff gets. And this is a game that I've only gotten to run a handful of times, and I haven't ever gotten to play it myself either, as just a player doing spellcasting things regularly. So there's that added layer of difficulty for me there. But what do you think? Have I described this well today? Do you think I've gotten this across, or have I completely missed the mark and need to go over it again and try to simplify and streamline this ever further? Go on down to hit those like or dislike buttons and let me know your thoughts down below, and we'll engage in discussion. And remember, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there to hit the subscribe button and become a regular member here at the Gamers Den. But with all that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Thank you all so very much for your time, and you all have yourselves a good night.